Hello, no Lori today. My name is Bailey Schluter. I'm the director of the McLeod County Historic Partnership. This is an organization whose mission is to foster collaboration among McLeod County communities and organizations to work towards preservation and the sharing of resources to preserve the history of McLeod County. And I'm going to highlight one project that my organization is currently managing. We are doing a cataloging project on behalf of Historic Hudson, the Glencoe Historic Preservation Society, and the City of Brownton. We've hired a collection specialist through a grant from the Minnesota Historical Society to go through all of these collections, update their records, check for any damage to the artifacts or where they're being stored, research the history behind them, so on and so forth. It's normal for historical societies to do big cataloging projects like this every 10 years just to go through their collection. You know, you can't stay on top of every little detail, especially when a piece has been in storage and then you put it on display, then you put it back in storage, or just over time check its condition. So that's what we're working on doing. I have a couple pieces from the Glencoe Historic Preservation Society and the City of Brownton School District collection, which I don't know if many people know that there is a school district display at the Brownton Civic Center. It's in their basement. It's a gorgeous display. I would really recommend going to look at it. Now, Glencoe has almost 1,000 items on display in the historic room at the Glencoe City Center. You can go anytime to look at it. The room's available to rent if you have a small gathering that you would like to have in this beautiful space. One of their pieces is this prayer bell. This was used in the Glencoe schools around the 1950s and 60s. During their lunch periods, when everyone's sitting down and had their lunch, usually a cafeteria worker would click the bell 3 times and the entire cafeteria would fall silent, if you can imagine that. Hundreds of students falling silent. And the bell was rung as a call to prayer. Everyone would silently say thanks for what they have and what they're eating, so on and so forth. And the bell will be struck 3 times again, and the ruckus would resume. This bell was used 3 times a day, every day, for almost 40 years. For all those generations of students would know this bell and know what it meant. So I think this is a really cool piece of history, especially since it's still at the site of the Glencoe School. It's still on display in that building, which I think is really cool. Another piece, this is technically an archive. It's classified as an archive because it's a piece of paper. This menu from the Stonewall Inn. Now this represents a little bit more recent piece of Glencoe town history. The Stonewall Inn was a restaurant located to the left of the Security State Bank in around the 1980s and 1990s. So if you're looking at the Security State Bank, it would just be to the left. It's this building right here, or excuse me, it was this building right here. This was the inn, and this was another local business. Both rooms upstairs were available to rent for banquet halls or wedding receptions, meetings, so on and so forth. But what's really cool about these structures was that in the center was a giant glass wall that connected the two. So if you were using both banquet halls, there was a way to connect them. You could walk between them without having to go outside. The Stonewall Inn was a popular Glencoe restaurant, but it really reflected McLeod County as a whole. They had such items as the Silver Lake sausage, reflecting Silver Lake's Polish and Czech history, the Plato Club, referencing Plato, Minnesota, and the Rare Bit Hutch, a sandwich on an English muffin. And you could get desserts for 50 cents. You could get a burger for $2.50. I don't know, it was like $9 now. That's insane. But one of my favorite things about this menu was that someone wrote on the back and left notes for whomever. We're not quite sure. But at the very bottom, there's a message. I think it's a quote. Someone named George says, "If the bank collector calls, I've passed on." Just like those little pieces that reflect the uniqueness of these communities are my favorite things. Just those little treasures. You don't know the full history, but you can speculate, and it's all part of the storytelling that historians love to share. So this is a really fun piece. And also, if you have any photos or stories of the Stonewall Inn, the Glencoe Museum would love you to contact them, because there's not much that's known about this property other than people's stories. So if you'd like to share that, feel free to contact them. All right, moving on to Brownton School. Now, the building that is in Brownton now was first built in 1920, with the first graduating class finishing their education in 1923. It was a 4-year high school. They had sports teams, theater, they wrote a quarterly newsletter, and all of that, or most of that, is on display at the Brownton Civic Center. One item on display is this beautiful, really good condition Letterman sweatshirt. Before those big bulky leather jackets that we're familiar with today, it was a simple sweater. And the intriguing aspect of this sweater, if you hear it crunching, it's because we've stuffed the sweater with a special kind of tissue paper that will help the sweater not dry out and still keep its shape. So if you hear that, that's what that is. But the intriguing part of this sweater over here, shark. We would love some help with this, because Brownton High School, their mascot was the Bears, and McLeod West, the school the name that it became when Brownton and Stewart consolidated in 1990s, they were the Falcons. So our guess is that shark was this owner's nickname, or maybe a team within a team. We're not quite sure. So if you know who the shark is, again, you can contact Ella at the Brownton Civic Center, or you can come to the Civic Center and talk to our collection specialist who's doing the inventory and teach us a little history. The last piece. This thing is huge, so I'm sorry. But this was a special homecoming robe. This one specifically was for the homecoming queen, and there's a matching one for the king on display in Brownton. But what I love about this is that it represents the history of Brownton schools as a whole. It represents Brownton Public School and McLeod West. You can see the first homecoming queen 1958, 1959, June Carg. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. But every queen thereafter, their name was stitched on the inside of this robe, and it keeps going and going until through the 90s, when the school consolidated with Stewart and became McLeod West. And you can see they also get a little bit more attention. These queens get a lot more detail. And then at the very bottom, the last homecoming queen for McLeod West High School, Marlene Lindemann, class of 2009. And I love this little note at the bottom, stitched in white. It says, "The tradition ends here, but the pride lives on. BHSMW," which is Brownton School District, McLeod West. So I love that this represents the school changed, the students changed, but the tradition lives on. And that's what you love about schools and about communities, that the traditions never die. So if you want to see this up close, or maybe find a relative of yours who was homecoming king or queen, again, you feel free to come visit their school display at the Brownton Civic Center in Brownton. I know I've mentioned that this project also is including Historic Hutchinson, but we haven't gotten to their collection yet. Our collection specialist finished Glencoe in October and is expecting to finish going through Brown's collection mid-January, and then she'll start with Historic Hutchinson. So maybe next month or February we'll highlight some pieces from them. But until then, thanks everyone. Bye.